In the 18th century, while America's founding fathers drafted the Declaration of Independence, thousands of African slaves toiled in southern fields, building fortunes for their white masters from cotton and tobacco crops. African American slaves were classed as non-citizens to be bought and sold at their master's whim. The lucky ones escaped and made their way to the north with the help of sympathetic whites who maintained a secret route known as the Underground Railroad. When the United States was born, all white American men were given the vote, but women and blacks were barred from political life. It wasn't until the abolition of slavery followed the end of the Civil War that black men were finally allowed to vote and stand for public office. But this decision was not without controversy. In the South, the huge population of freed slaves meant the black population outnumbered the white in some areas. Freedom did not mean prosperity, with former slaves generally forced to work their old plantations, as they had no training to do anything else. Unwilling to relinquish power, white politicians warned their constituents of the dangers of black rule and argued that African Americans had a lesser intellect than their white brothers. However, the black men and women who challenged racism at every level of United States society and achieved political greatness against tremendous odds were of a caliber that gave the lie to racialist theories. One of America's greatest politicians was Frederick Douglass, a former slave. Secretly taught to read by the wife of his owner, Douglass wrote a best-selling autobiography about his experiences and campaigned against slavery. His impromptu speech on the death of President Lincoln was considered to be one of the most impressive ever heard. Lincoln's widow gave Douglass the president's favorite walking stick in appreciation for his tribute. After the Civil War, he served as president of a savings bank, a diplomat to Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and a United States Marshal. In 1872, he was nominated as the vice presidential candidate on the ticket of the first woman to stand for the United States presidency, Victoria Woodhull. In 1877, he was the first African American to nominate for the presidency. Henry Cheatham was another black politician who reached the top echelons of power. He was elected to Congress in 1889, closely followed by George Henry White, a former slave who won a congressional seat in 1896. White campaigned for an end to racial discrimination and lobbied to have lynching made a federal crime, arguing that white Southerners were using it as a tactic to terrorize African American communities. But the tide turned against black Americans in political life, and the Southern states legislated against black franchise. In the 1960s, a major campaign called on the federal government to use its powers to force the South to grant equal voting rights to black Americans, resulting in the Voting Rights Act of 1965. African Americans returned to public life and carved out notable careers in government. They included Massachusetts Senator Edward Brooke, who became the first black senator in history to be voted into office in 1966, and Robert Weaver, the first African American in cabinet, who became the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Lyndon Johnson. In 1972, Barbara Jordan became the first African American woman to be elected to Congress from a Southern state. She served 3 terms in the House of Representatives and delivered one of the greatest speeches in history at the 1976 Democratic Convention. As the first African American woman elected to Congress, Shirley Chisholm made history in 1972 by seeking the Democratic nomination for president. The first black female Democrat put herself forward as a contender. Her campaign was unsuccessful, but she had a distinguished career in the House of Representatives. The 21st century has seen African Americans in the most trusted positions in the land. Former General and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, became the first black Secretary of State under President George W. Bush in 2001. He was succeeded by the first black woman to serve as Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, a political scientist with a gift for languages. African Americans have served many vital roles in American political history. If Barack Obama becomes President of the United States in 2008, he will join a long tradition of distinguished men and women who broke through the color barrier to give outstanding service to their country.